My brother sold our grandfather's farm, but he had no idea what he'd done. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. I never imagined I'd return to my grandfather's farm like this. Life has a way of dragging you back to places you thought you'd left behind, especially when betrayal forces your hand. It started with a phone call. A Tuesday afternoon, I was in my Denver office, putting the finishing touches on a research report about sustainable irrigation techniques when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the name, Liam, my younger brother. We hadn't spoken much in the past few years. He was always off chasing his next big business idea, and I was too buried in my work to get caught up in family drama. But something in my gut told me to answer. I picked up. "Natalie," he said, his voice too smug, too casual. "Figure I should let you know, I sold the farm." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. "What?" "Grandpa's farm. Got $3 million for it." My breath caught in my throat. He said it like it was just another business deal. Not the land where we spent our childhood summers. Not the place where Grandpa Henry built his entire life's work. My grip on the phone tightened. "You sold it?" Without even talking to me, Liam sighed, his tone dripping with annoyance. "Come on, Natalie. You haven't set foot on that land in years. You're too busy with your scientist life in Denver. It was just sitting there collecting dust." My chest burned with anger. "You had no right to do that, Liam." He laughed. A sharp, careless sound. "Actually, I did. Grandpa made me executor. That means I get to make the calls." I could barely process his words. My thoughts spun, my heart pounding. "Where's the money?" Silence. Then a chuckle. "I spent it." Everything in me went cold. "What do you mean you spent it?" "My girlfriend, Olivia, her business needed a boost," Liam said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "She had this amazing investment opportunity, and she needed funds fast. So, I helped her out." It felt like the air had been knocked from my lungs. "You sold Grandpa's farm for less than half of what it was worth and blew the money on Olivia's business. She needed it more than you." Liam shot back, defensive now. "You don't need the money, Natalie. You have your career, your fancy research projects. What do you care about some old farm?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Without another word, I hung up. Within an hour, I had canceled my plans, booked the next flight to Texas, and packed my bags. Liam thought he could get away with this. But what he didn't know was that Grandpa Henry wasn't a fool, and I had a feeling he had seen this coming. The farm wasn't what he thought. The flight to Austin felt like the longest trip of my life. I spent every second replaying Liam's words in my head, feeling my anger shift into something sharper, determination. By the time I landed, I had one goal in mind: fix this mess. I drove straight to the farm, or at least what used to be the farm. As I pulled up, I felt a wave of emotions crash over me. Memories flooded back. Summer mornings feeding the horses, the smell of fresh rain on tilled soil, the echo of Grandpa Henry's deep laughter from the porch. But now the land looked abandoned, overgrown, forgotten, so like it was nothing. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Liam had made a terrible mistake. But then, I saw it, and I couldn't stop the small smile that tugged at my lips. Because the farmhouse he sold, the one he thought was worth $9 million, it wasn't Grandpa Henry's real farm at all. The truth about the farm. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching against the gravel as I took in the sight before me. The farmhouse Liam had sold, the one he thought was worth millions, wasn't the real deal. It was a decoy. Grandpa Henry had 2 farmhouses on his land. The first one, the one Liam sold, was an old guest house that hadn't been used in years. It sat on a small piece of the property, far from the real farm, the one Grandpa had poured his entire life into. I let out a breath, my anger shifting into something else, amusement. Liam had no idea what he'd done. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, finding the one person who could clear this up immediately: Walter Bennett, Grandpa's longtime lawyer. When he picked up, his voice was steady, like he'd been expecting my call. "Natalie, I was wondering when I'd hear from you." "Walter," I said, still staring at the abandoned house Liam had so proudly sold. "We need to talk. Now." The legal bombshell. The next morning, I walked into Walter Bennett's office in downtown Dallas. He was already waiting, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, his sharp eyes filled with something close to expectation. "I take it this is about Liam," he said, gesturing for me to sit. I didn't waste time. "He sold the farm. Without my consent. He says he had the right." Walter sighed, tapping his fingers against a thick folder on his desk. "Yes. I received the notice yesterday." I clenched my fists. "So that's it? He wins." Walter gave a small, knowing smile. "That depends. Have you read your grandfather's final estate documents?" A strange feeling stirred in my chest. I read the will. It left everything to both of us, but Liam was executor. Walter nodded. "That's true, but your grandfather was a very careful man." He slid the folder toward me. 2 weeks before he passed, he filed an amended deed. I hesitated before opening it. The first page immediately caught my eye. Character clause. I read the words aloud, my pulse quickening. Walter's expression turned serious. "Your grandfather knew Liam's weaknesses. He loved him, but he didn't trust him with the farm. So he added a safeguard." I looked up, heart pounding. "What kind of safeguard?" Walter leaned back in his chair. "If either of you attempted to sell the farm without the other's agreement, ownership would immediately and irrevocably transfer to the wrong party." I blinked, trying to process what I was hearing. "Are you saying—" Walter nodded. "Yes, Natalie. The sale is void. The farm is yours." A mix of relief and shock washed over me. Liam didn't know about this, and I had no intention of telling him. Not until it was too late. The moment of reckoning. That evening, I drove back to the farm, my fingers gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the overgrown fields. This land, it wasn't just property. It was our grandfather's legacy. Everything he had built, everything he had left behind. And Liam had tried to throw it away for a quick payday. I stepped onto the porch, my boots thudding against the wooden planks. The farmhouse might have been neglected, but it still stood strong. It wasn't just land, it was history. Tomorrow, Liam would learn the truth. He thought he had won, but he had no idea what was coming. The showdown. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind racing with everything that was about to happen. Liam had no clue that his so-called victory was about to collapse right in front of him. And knowing my brother, he wasn't going to take it well. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in Walter Bennett's office, my hands resting calmly on the table. Walter had arranged a legal meeting, ensuring Liam and his lawyer would be present. When Liam finally strolled in, 20 minutes late, of course, he had the same arrogant smirk on his face. Dressed in an expensive suit, one he probably bought with the money he had no right to touch. Olivia followed behind him, arms crossed, looking annoyed that she even had to be there. His lawyer, a nervous-looking man who barely looked old enough to drink, shuffled in behind them. Liam's eyes landed on me, and his smirk widened. "Wow, Natalie, didn't think you cared enough to show up." I didn't take the bait. Instead, I gestured toward the empty chair across from me. "Seat." Liam flopped into the chair with an exaggerated sigh. "Let's make this quick. I've got better things to do." Walter cleared his throat, ignoring Liam's attitude. "Liam, I assume you're aware that Natalie has concerns regarding the sale of your grandfather's farm." Liam rolled his eyes, leaning back. "We've been over this. I was the executor. I had every legal right to sell the property." Walter calmly slid a document across the table. "Actually, you didn't." Liam frowned, but picked it up. As his eyes scanned the words, I watched his smug expression fade. The arrogance drained from his face. His hands tightened around the paper. For the first time in years, I saw something real in his eyes. Fear. What is this? His voice wasn't so confident anymore. Walter steepled his fingers. "That is the amended deed your grandfather filed 2 weeks before his passing. It contains a character clause stating that if one of his grandchildren attempted to sell the farm without the other's consent, ownership would automatically and irrevocably transfer to the wrong party." Liam's face went pale. "No, that can't be right." "Oh, but it is," I said, my voice steady. "The moment you signed that sale agreement, you lost everything. The farm belongs to me now." Liam slammed the document onto the table. "This is a setup," he snapped. "Grandpa wouldn't do this to me." Walter remained calm. Henry Carter knew his grandchildren well, Liam. He knew Natalie would protect the farm. And he knew you. Well, let's just say he anticipated your actions. Liam turned to his lawyer, his voice frantic. Do something. The young man shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Legally speaking, the amendment is binding. The sale is void. Olivia crossed her arms, her voice sharp. So what does that mean? The money is gone. We already spent it. I leaned back in my chair. That's your problem. Liam's face twisted in frustration as he shoved his chair back and stood up. You can't just take everything from me. I met his glare. I didn't take it. You threw it away. A heavy silence filled the room. Liam had lost. Completely. But Walter wasn't finished. He tapped another document on the table. There's one more issue. Liam's jaw tightened. What now? As executor, you had a legal duty to uphold the estate's integrity. By selling the farm without Natalie's consent, you violated those duties. Walter's voice remained calm. Effective immediately, you are removed as executor. Liam froze. His eyes flicked to the paper like it was a death sentence. You're joking. Nope, I said, leaning forward. I'm in charge now. For the first time since walking into the room, Liam had nothing to say. Olivia grabbed his arm, her patience finally snapping. Liam, we need to go. But before they could reach the door, Walter spoke one last time. Oh, and Liam? Liam stopped, shoulders tense. What? Walter's tone was calm, almost too calm. Any attempt to challenge this legally will result in a full estate audit. Liam turned slowly. What does that mean? Walter folded his hands on the desk. It means every single financial transaction you made as executor will be investigated. He paused, letting the words sink in. And if any irregularities are found, he didn't have to finish the sentence. Liam knew exactly what that meant. Every shady deal, every dollar he had funneled into Olivia's business. Exposed. Liam swallowed hard. His hands clenched into fists. He didn't say another word. He just stormed out. Olivia trailed behind him, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. The second the door swung shut, I let out a slow breath. It was over. At least, I thought it was. The real reason behind Liam's desperation. That night, I sat on Grandpa Henry's old porch, staring out at the land under the cool Texas sky. I should have felt relief. I had won. The farm was mine. Liam was out of the picture. But something nagged at me. Liam was reckless, sure. Greedy, absolutely. But he wasn't stupid. He had to know this was a possibility. That Grandpa would have put safeguards in place. So why'd he been so desperate? As if to answer my thoughts, my phone buzzed. A text from Liam. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him deal with the consequences of his actions on his own. But I knew my brother. Liam never walked away without a backup plan. After a long moment, I typed my reply. Meet me at the farmhouse. 1 hour. The confession. By the time I arrived, the sky had darkened, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. The kind of scent that always came before a storm. The farmhouse loomed in the night, its silhouette against the stars. Broken fences stretched across the land, overgrown with weeds. Liam pulled up 10 minutes late, his headlights cutting through the shadows. For the first time in a long time, he was alone. Olivia was nowhere in sight. He climbed out of his SUV slowly, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. There was no arrogance this time. No smagismite. Just tension. You got what you wanted, he muttered. I leaned against the porch railing, watching him carefully. Did I? Liam let out a bitter laugh. Spare me the lecture. Natalie, you think you're the hero in all this. He gestured to the land. You left. You had your career, your research, your perfect life. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who took care of everything. I tilted my head. You didn't take care of anything, Liam. You sold Grandpa's farm for a quick payday, and you burned through the money like it was nothing. His jaw clenched. I was trying to build something. I crossed my arms. And where is it now? Liam didn't answer, and that silence told me everything. Something in my gut twisted. This wasn't just about the farm. I stepped closer. Liam, how bad is it? He hesitated. His eyes darted away, and for the first time I saw it. Fear. I swallowed hard. Liam. My voice was steady. What did you do? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. I borrowed against Grandpa's other accounts. My stomach dropped. What? He let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. The estate's tax accounts, the maintenance funds, the savings, everything. I pulled from them thinking I could pay it back before anyone noticed. His voice cracked, but the investment tanked. The developer went bankrupt, and now his shoulders sagged. Now it's gone. I felt physically sick. How much? My voice barely rose above a whisper. Liam swallowed hard. Then he spoke. $750,000. The world tilted for a second. I pressed my fingers against my forehead, forcing myself to think. That's why he was so desperate. That's why he had sold the farm in a panic. He wasn't just reckless. He was drowning in a hole he couldn't climb out of. I took a slow breath, pushing through the anger, the betrayal, the exhaustion. "And Olivia?" I asked. Liam let out a humorless chuckle. She left, took what little she could, and ran the second she realized there was nothing left. I should have walked away. I should have told Liam this was his mess to fix. But then I thought of Grandpa Henry, how he had always believed in second chances. And despite everything, Liam was still my brother. I pulled out my phone and dialed Walter. He answered on the second ring. "I need to see you. Now. One last chance." An hour later, Liam and I sat in Walter's office. Walter, unshaken as always, didn't even seem surprised when I told him everything. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Your grandfather knew this was a possibility," Walter said, sliding the file toward me. My heart raced as I flipped through the pages. Legal contingencies, financial safeguards, backup plans. Walter tapped one document. "This is an insurance policy covering unauthorized estate investments," he explained. "If triggered, it allows for recovery of up to $800,000. Liam let out a breath like he'd been punched. "So we're covered?" he asked, almost hopeful. Walter's gaze hardened. "Not exactly." Liam tensed. "Of course there's a catch." Walter folded his hands. "First, you must sign an official admission of wrongdoing, acknowledging your misuse of estate funds in writing." Liam stiffened. "And if I don't?" Walter's voice didn't waver. "Then Natalie will have no choice but to file a legal claim against you, which would trigger a full forensic audit of the estate's finances." He paused. "Given the evidence, it's likely you'd be charged with fraud." Liam's face drained of color. "Fraud," he repeated. Walter nodded. "Yes, and that would mean prison time." Liam's hand shook slightly as he wiped it over his face. "And the other conditions?" "You will be required to attend financial counseling at your own expense." And Walter's eyes locked onto Liam's. "You will have no further involvement in the estate. Ever." Liam turned to me, his voice almost pleading. "And you're okay with this?" I held his gaze. "I don't want to see you in prison, Liam, but I'm not going to protect you from the consequences of what you did." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly he nodded. "Fine." Walter slid the admission document forward. Liam took the pen with shaking hands. And he signed. And just like that, it was over. Picking up the pieces, we stepped outside Walter's office into the crisp night air. Liam stood by his car, staring at the city skyline. His expression was unreadable, but the weight of everything that had just happened hung between us like a storm cloud. "I don't know what to do now," he admitted quietly. I hesitated before answering. "You start over." Liam let out a weak laugh. "Ow!" I sighed, studying him, the brother I had grown up with, the one who had lost himself chasing all the wrong things. I didn't know if I could trust him again, but I knew one thing. Grandpa Henry never gave up on us. "The farm still needs fixing," I said after a pause. "You could help." His head snapped toward me, eyes wide with surprise. "You'd let me?" I met his gaze. "You're still my brother, Liam. But this isn't about money anymore. If you want a second chance, you have to earn it." He didn't answer right away, but after a long pause, he nodded. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to fix what was broken. The hard road to redemption. The days after meeting with Walter felt heavy, filled with long silences and the weight of everything that had happened. I had spent so long being angry at Liam, convinced he would never change, that it felt strange to see him now, humbled, uncertain, and lost. But there we were, standing on Grandpa Henry's farm, staring at the overgrown fields, the broken fences, and the house that had once been full of life. Liam let out a slow breath. I barely recognize it. I glanced at him. Yeah, well, that's what happens when someone tries to sell a place instead of taking care of it. He exhaled sharply, but didn't argue. He wasn't fighting anymore. And for the first time in years, I saw something shifting in him. We spent the next week clearing out the old barn, fixing the fences, and assessing the damage caused by years of neglect and bad decisions. Liam wasn't used to this kind of work. At first, he struggled, but to my surprise, he showed up every morning, and he never complained. One evening, after an exhausting day of repairing the porch steps, I found him sitting on the front steps, staring out at the land. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields, the same view Grandpa Henry used to love. I used to hate this place, Liam admitted. His voice was quiet, hesitant. I sat down beside him, wiping the sweat from my forehead. And now, he was silent for a long time before sighing. Now, I think I get it. Grandpa wasn't trying to hold us back. He was giving us something that actually mattered. I nodded, watching the wind move through the tall grass. He always thought 5 moves ahead. Liam chuckled, though there wasn't much humor in it. Yeah, and I never thought past the next dollar sign. A future worth fighting for. The next few months passed in a rhythm of hard work and quiet realizations. Liam stuck with it, something I honestly hadn't expected. At first, I kept my guard up, waiting for him to give up, to run when things got hard. But he didn't. He learned how to fix the equipment, how to plant crops properly, how to care for the land the way Grandpa Henry had. And slowly, I realized something. He wasn't just doing it for me. He was doing it for himself. One afternoon, we stood in the middle of the restored barn. The scent of fresh hay filled the air. Liam wiped his hands on his jeans, glancing around. It actually looks like a real farm again. That's because it is. He let out a deep breath, nodding. Feels different. I studied him. You feel different. Liam hesitated before nodding. Yeah, for the first time, I believed him. The legacy lives on. A year after everything fell apart, we held a ceremony in Grandpa Henry's honor. We invited neighbors, old friends, and the few people in town who had known him well. Liam stood next to me as we unveiled a memorial plaque near the farmhouse. It simply read, Henry Carter, a man who built more than land. As the sun set over the farm, I realized something. Grandpa had always planned for this. Not just for the land, not just for the money, for us. He had known that Liam and I would never truly see eye to eye until something forced us to. He had built in safeguards, knowing Liam's weaknesses. But he had left the door open for redemption. And Liam had finally stepped through it. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I found Liam sitting on the porch, watching the stars. Still thinking about running back to Austin? I asked. He smirked. Nah, turns out I like the quiet. I sat down beside him, letting the cool night air settle around us. Do you think Grandpa knew this would happen? Liam asked after a while. I thought about it before answering. Yeah, I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Liam sighed, a small smile on his lips. Yeah, me too. And for the first time in a long time, we sat there, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as family. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.